My name's Sarah, and this is my restaurant. It's called Brothmonger, and I am Brothmonger. I moved to Pittsburgh in late January of 2010 to go to the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science. I grew up in a really small town, so I wanted to move to Pittsburgh like my whole life. It was like the first time in my life that I had the feeling where I was like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is where I belong. I lived in Shadyside. My school was in East Liberty, so my world was very small. When I first moved here, it was just like those like 5 streets. And I just remember like walking between like my house and school and being like everything is perfect. I had graduated high school 6 months before I moved here, and now I'm 34, and I feel like the city has kind of like grown with me and like nurtured me into adulthood. I've changed so much, but I feel like I've watched Pittsburgh change so much. Every neighborhood that I'm familiar with is so different now than it was in 2010. And I've been living in the north side now for like 10 years, and it's the same thing. It's like constantly changing, but also always staying the same. From my perspective, it's kind of like on a good trajectory. I feel like good things are happening in the restaurant scene. Like more and more restaurants are opening, and it's become a little bit more accessible for people who want to open restaurants. I started cooking when I was like in my early 20s. My mom cooked my whole life, and she would always like try to teach me how to cook, but I didn't want to learn. She was always like, let me teach you how to make something. And I was like, leave me alone. And then I moved in with my boyfriend at the time, and he was a line cook, and he like didn't want to cook at home. And I was becoming more domestic. So I started calling my mom and having her teach me how to make stuff over the phone. And then he would also teach me stuff. He had gone to culinary school. So I just kind of like little by little learned from her and him, but then like mostly taught myself. I like it because I feel like I am good at it. It's just like feels good to be good at something. But it's also, I've always kind of been like looking for avenues of like care and like nurturing people, and that's like one of the easiest and like, you know, most like direct ways to kind of like take care of someone. So that's obviously very like appealing to me about cooking for people. When I started like learning basically over the phone from my mom, the thing that I missed was her soup. She basically made soup like every week when we were growing up. She was a single mother and would work nights. So she would just make like a huge portion of soup for my brothers and I to have over the next like 3 days. So when I started learning how to cook from her, that was like the first thing that I wanted her to teach me how to make. And I was living with my line cook boyfriend at the time, and he was like, this is your thing. I don't understand why, but this is like the best soup I've ever had, and you're very good at like soups and sauces. So I just like, you know, continued to kind of teach myself how to cook. And then by the time I got more into it when I was like 25, I had like the sausage tortellini soup. And if somebody was like, I don't feel good, I would be like, I'll make you a soup. And so I would like deliver it to them. The first time I sold it, I was working at Badammo's Pizza as like their counter girl. And I was like talking to Anthony. I told him that I wanted to make soup for the pizza shop for him to sell. And he was like, you know, why don't you just like start an Instagram account and start selling soup on Instagram? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And then I made soup. I made sausage tortellini and chicken noodle, and it was like 8 quarts of each. The next day I went to the Pittsburgh Vintage Mixer to work for Badammo's because he was selling pies there. And Rick Sebak came up, and I had met Rick multiple times, but he like came up and got some pizza, and I was like, hey Rick, I'm selling soup now. And he was like, I love soup. And I was like, come get some. And he gave me $12 in cash, and then he came to my house and picked up soup from my house. I have like this really great still from my security camera of Rick Sebak like coming into my yard to get soup. And then he posted it on his Facebook, like, I picked up soup from Brothmonger, and posted pictures of it and stuff. And I went from like having 100 followers on Instagram to 600 in like 12 hours. And then the pandemic hit and it like exploded. I did Brothmonger out of my apartment in the north side for the entirety of 2020. And it was crazy. I made soup every week. I bought a second refrigerator to put in my laundry room. We had a utility sink in the laundry room. My boyfriend was just like washing pots all day and absolutely miserable. I was like selling it on Instagram, taking money through Venmo. It was crazy. And then in early March of 2021, I got a phone call at the funeral home that I was working at from the health department. And they were like, "Are you selling soup out of your apartment?" And I was like, "Yeah." They were like, "You need to stop doing that." They mailed me a cease and desist. There was just like this public outrage that the hammer was brought down on me, even though it very well deserved to be. And then I was at work and I had the most challenging funeral of my career. At the time I was 30 and the funeral that I was handling was for a guy who was 30 and his mom was the same age as my mom, and it was just like gut-wrenching. And I was at the cemetery for this kid's funeral and I got a phone call from Ann Gilligan, who owns Mayfly in the north side, and she was like, "My chef is going to be leaving and I heard that you might need a place, and I think that like this could work out mutually really well." And I was like, this like could not have come at a better time. So I went over to Mayfly and checked out the space, and it was basically a handshake deal. And then I started making soup exclusively there and kind of like running Brothmonger through Mayfly. And I did that for a year. And then I started chasing Ryan, who is my boyfriend now. And he owns Time Machine. I was kind of like shopping around for a place to start cooking again. I was like reaching out to him like, "Hey, do you want to do like a pop-up with me?" We did a pop-up together. It went insane. There was like 200 people there. We didn't have enough food. The line was like an hour and a half long, and we got totally like annihilated. We were like, "Oh, next time we'll do a better job." And then we were like, "We're never doing this again." And then we met to talk about our second pop-up, and we didn't talk about the pop-up at all. We were just like, we love each other. And then we started dating, and I started working at Time Machine on the weekends. I was still working at the funeral home full time, and I started making soup out of like the Bitter Ends Time Machine kitchen and selling it through like pop-ups at Time Machine and at Gina's Linea Verde Green Market. That went on for like a year. I was growing more and more kind of like miserable with my funeral career, and I just really wanted to quit. And Ryan told me that I was allowed to, so I did. And I'm so glad I did. So after I quit the funeral home, I started working at Time Machine and making soup exclusively. And I did that for a year. And then last summer, Ryan sat me down and he was like, "I really think that you are complacent and you are like letting your potential go, and Brothmonger could be humongous, but like you are the one who has to do something about it." And he just like gave me the kick in the ass that I needed. And then I reached out to Honeycomb. Our conversation was like mid-May. The Honeycomb conversation started early June. The campaign kicked off mid-June, reached $100,000 in 3 days. And then I like got the money by July, and I closed on my restaurant August 1st. And then my restaurant opened October 24th. So the timeline was wild. I do really feel like the way that Brothmonger happened could have only happened in Pittsburgh. When I started doing Honeycomb, I was like, what if nobody gives me any money? And they were like, no, Pittsburgh is like a champion city. They like show up for their like small town heroes. And they absolutely did. It's because people were coming to my house to pick up soup, you know, and they like see me out at the bar, or they like see me at the grocery store. They're like, I know her. When Ryan is out and he's like, oh, my girlfriend owns Brothmonger, they don't say like, I love Brothmonger. They say, I love her. They feel like we're friends, and we are. It's like small town aspect of this city has allowed me to kind of, you know, feel like a big fish in a small pond or something like that. It just like has allowed me to kind of feel like I know everyone and like everyone knows me. I feel very accessible. I was like raised by a single mother who was a really kind of like hard ass, badass lady. And she raised me very intentionally to be like, you can do anything that you want to do and you don't need anyone else to do it. And I feel like that is a big part of who I am. Like, I painted this room. I put up this trim. I really feel like I can do anything. And if I want to, I will.
That is what makes you a pioneer.
Yeah, that is how I feel. I feel like it's very necessary for somebody who wants to be a business owner or start a business or grow a business to kind of have that drive that it's like, if somebody says no to you, go find someone else to ask. It also feels like Pittsburgh to me. It's like Rust Belt. We like joke all the time here that like Crocs don't have bootstraps. Obviously the like pull up your bootstraps thing is like rife with issues, but that is how I feel. I feel like I wake up every day and pull up my bootstraps. I like really go back with Bloomfield and with Liberty Avenue. And then when I started working in the food industry, it was like, I felt like I was like coming back home. I was working at Time Machine for like a year and a half, and I just got to know like all of the regulars, all of the people that live in this neighborhood, and then like selling soup at Gina's. I just kind of like got the feel for Bloomfield, and it has like such this like attitude. My mom's side of the family is Italian, and they're all just like beautiful people. And that's how I feel like Bloomfield is. I like still can't believe that I own a restaurant. It's like very, very wild. My nephew was in here last week and he was like, Aunt Sarah, why do you own a restaurant? And I was like, I don't know. But then he was like, well, how does it feel to own a restaurant? And I was like, it rules. It's awesome. Definitely like grown a lot. The menu has grown a lot, but I feel like I have been in control of all of the changes, and I really love all the people that work here, and I feel like they love working here. It's been really cool. If we closed tomorrow, I would be like, that was cool. I always wanted to be a funeral director, and I thought that I would do that my whole life. I never really like thought that I would own a restaurant, but even before I knew how to cook, I was like, it would be so cool to own a restaurant someday. All I want is a place where people can come in, say hello to me, and be like, I'm hungry, and I'll be like, what do you want me to make for you? And then I would make them something. That was like my dream, and I feel like I'm doing that.